Have you ever felt like the universe was whispering something just beyond your understanding? A truth so powerful it could shift the very fabric of your life. That's where Emmet Fox began. Not with noise, but with silence. In that silence, he discovered something few dared to explore, an invisible force more potent than wealth, fame, or even love, the power of thought as a divine instrument. He understood that reality doesn't respond to action first, it responds to belief. And not surface-level belief, but belief that vibrates in harmony with what you seek. While the world chased results, Emmet Fox went straight to the root: consciousness. He knew your inner dialogue shapes the outer world, that your circumstances are nothing but the shadows cast by your mind's light or its darkness. He wasn't just preaching positivity, he was unlocking a formula. If your thoughts match the frequency of truth, peace, abundance, then reality must follow. It cannot resist, and that was only the beginning of what he knew. Emmet Fox wasn't born into privilege. He didn't have the backing of a fortune or the security of status. What he had was curiosity and a deep inner stirring that the world was more than what it appeared to be. From an early age, he was fascinated by the nature of reality, not from the angle of science or academia, but from the soul's perspective. He watched how people lived, how they thought, how they spoke, and more importantly, how their lives reflected those patterns back to them. Some lived in constant anxiety, drowning in fear, plagued by illness, misfortune, or poverty. Others seemed to glide through life with ease, as if they had discovered some hidden rhythm that protected and guided them. This contrast didn't sit well with Fox. He knew there had to be a reason why some attracted joy and others pain. It wasn't luck, it wasn't fate, and it definitely wasn't a punishment from a vengeful universe. It had to be something else, something within. As he delved deeper into spiritual texts and ancient wisdom, Fox began to see the connection between thought and outcome. He explored not just religious doctrine, but mystical teachings that had existed for centuries, teachings buried under ritual and dogma, waiting to be rediscovered by a mind brave enough to challenge convention. He found the writings of Jesus not as a call to blind belief, but as coded instructions on how to live from within. When Jesus said, "As you believe, so shall it be done unto you," Fox saw it as more than moral encouragement. He saw it as a law as reliable and powerful as gravity. Every thought, he realized, carries within it a vibration. That vibration either harmonizes with the divine or clashes against it, and your experience is simply the echo of that vibration, made visible. Fox began testing this, not in grand experiments, but in quiet moments of mental discipline. He would catch himself in negative thoughts and shift them deliberately. Like tuning an instrument, he noticed how his emotions would follow the new thoughts, how his energy changed, and slowly, how his external life began to mirror these subtle inner adjustments. This wasn't wishful thinking. This was engineering reality from the inside out. Most people were busy trying to change their environment, fix their relationships, manipulate situations, and strive endlessly for success, never realizing they were trying to paint over a cracked wall without repairing the foundation. Fox stopped painting. He went underground. He worked at the level of thought. He taught others to do the same. He told them, your outer world is a printout of your inner programming. If you don't like what you see, don't blame the screen, change the code. But people resisted. It was easier to blame others, the government, the economy, the past. It was harder to sit in silence and admit that maybe, just maybe, you were broadcasting the very signal that life was responding to. Fox didn't force anyone. He just lived his truth, and those who watched his life began to notice something different about him. Not just in what he said, but in the peace he carried, the calm in his voice, the certainty in his gaze. He didn't react to chaos. He didn't fear uncertainty, because he had discovered the eye of the storm and he lived there. He explained this using the metaphor of a radio. Every thought you think is like tuning your mind to a station. If you want to hear classical music, you don't tune to a heavy metal station. If you want peace, you don't tune your thoughts to fear, hatred, or anxiety. The universe is like a broadcasting system. It sends you the frequency you're tuned into. If your inner state is constantly negative, you will receive negative outcomes, not because you're cursed, but because you're aligned with that energy. But if you shift your internal frequency, if you raise it through gratitude, faith, love, and forgiveness, then life begins to echo that vibration back to you. The power, Fox said, lies not in controlling the world but in controlling the dial. This was radical thinking for his time. It still is, because it puts the responsibility back into your hands. It strips away the comfort of victimhood. It challenges you to be the author of your reality rather than a character trapped by circumstance. Fox knew this wasn't easy. Years of conditioned thinking don't unravel overnight, but he believed in the power of practice, of daily repetition, of conscious redirection. He taught that you don't need to become perfect to change your life. You just need to become aware. You need to become intentional. And most importantly, you need to persist. Persistence was one of the cornerstones of Fox's philosophy. He knew that one positive thought in a sea of negativity wouldn't change much, but one positive thought held persistently, consistently, in the face of opposition that could rewrite reality. It was about momentum. The mind is like a river. It flows in the direction of its strongest current. If your strongest current is fear, your life will carry you toward more fear. But if you build the current of faith, of vision, of truth, then slowly the river turns, not with force, but with consistency. Every time you redirect a fearful thought toward faith, every time you choose love over resentment, every time you focus on the good instead of the bad, you change the flow. You begin to master your current. Fox didn't claim this was easy. He acknowledged the difficulty. He knew what it was like to be human, to feel pain, to experience doubt, to struggle. But he also knew that struggle was the training ground for spiritual strength. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Just like muscles grow through resistance, your soul grows through contrast. You don't develop peace by avoiding conflict. You develop peace by staying centered in the middle of it. Fox didn't run from challenges. He met them with inner stillness. And through that stillness, he found answers others couldn't hear. He found direction in silence, clarity in confusion, and strength in surrender. One of the most misunderstood parts of his teaching was his view on surrender. People thought it meant giving up, becoming passive or weak. But to Fox, surrender wasn't about defeat, it was about alignment. It was about letting go of ego's need to control and trusting the higher intelligence that governs all life. He believed that when you surrender your fear, your need to manipulate, your obsession with results, then you allow divine order to step in. And divine order always moves toward healing, wholeness, and abundance. But it requires trust. It requires letting go of how and when and simply aligning with the what. What do you truly desire? Peace, joy, love, freedom. Then become those things inside, and life will match them outside. That Fox wasn't interested in theories. He wanted transformation. He didn't preach from pulpits of perfection. He spoke from the trenches of experience. He had faced personal loss, public criticism, inner battles, but he never let those define him, because he didn't define himself by circumstance. He defined himself by truth, and truth, he said, is unchangeable. You are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to think about what happens to you. That choice, that single, sacred choice, is where all your power lies. In his quiet hours, Fox would meditate not just to escape the world, but to attune to it. He saw meditation not as escape, but as activation, a way to connect with the divine intelligence that permeates all things. He believed that God is not distant, but immediate, not separate, but intimate, and the bridge between you and God is not ritual or tradition, it is thought. The quality of your thought is the quality of your connection. Think low, and you feel far from God. Think high, and you feel divine presence. It's not about deserving, it's about aligning. And alignment is available to everyone, regardless of past, title, or belief. Fox's life was a living experiment in this principle. He didn't just teach it, he embodied it. And those who met him felt it, not in his words, but in his presence. A calm that was unshakable. A clarity that pierced through confusion, a love that didn't need to be spoken to be felt. He had touched something eternal and it had changed him from the inside out. But he never claimed to be special. He insisted the same power lived in all of us, the same access, the same potential. The only difference was awareness. Once you become aware that your thoughts create your reality, you can never go back to sleep. You begin to watch yourself not with judgment, but with curiosity. You start to see patterns. You catch the old stories trying to play again. And in that moment, you get to choose. Keep playing the old track or write a new one. That choice, repeated daily, becomes transformation. It's not flashy, it's not always dramatic, but it is powerful, and over time, it creates a new life. A life that no longer reacts to the world, but co-creates with it. Fox's greatest contribution was not in what he taught, but in what he reminded us of. That the power is not out there, it's in here, always has been, always will be, and once you know that, nothing, absolutely nothing can take it from you. They say some secrets aren't hidden, they're simply ignored. Emmet Fox didn't uncover a secret with his hands. He tuned into it with his soul. While others prayed through fear, he prayed through alignment. He taught that prayer wasn't about begging, but becoming. To him, true prayer was the elevation of consciousness, the tuning of thought to divine reality. He realized that what you constantly think about is what you become, not metaphorically, but literally. The universe, he believed, doesn't care what you want, it cares what you expect. This was the key. Expectations are built not from desperation, but from inner certainty. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And what you are is determined by what you habitually think. Most people never slow down enough to notice the repeating stories in their mind. But Fox did, and he rewrote them with precision, with purpose, with power. To understand how deeply this insight changed everything for Emmet Fox, we must understand how the world around him worked. Society had been trained to equate prayer with submission, with helplessness, with throwing oneself at the feet of an unreachable force. People were taught to beg for mercy, to plead for blessings, to cry out in despair hoping to catch the attention of a distant God. But Emmet Fox saw this as an insult to divine intelligence. He didn't believe God was withholding love, waiting for the right amount of groveling. He saw prayer as the means by which the mind makes contact with higher intelligence, a precise spiritual technology, not superstition. When you pray with fear, you align with fear. When you pray with confidence, you align with truth. And alignment is everything. This realization didn't come to Fox overnight. It was cultivated through years of observation, meditation, and reflection. He watched how people's lives corresponded with their dominant inner focus. He noticed how those who constantly worried ended up attracting more circumstances to worry about. He saw how those who believed in doom, sickness, and lack seemed to find it at every turn. And conversely, he saw how those who carried faith, not a passive faith, but an active, expectant faith, were more resilient, more creative, and more blessed, even when the world around them seemed unstable. That fascinated him. If two people could live in the same world and experience entirely different realities, then the difference must not be in the world, it must be in them. Fox began experimenting with what he called scientific prayer. It wasn't about reciting memorized lines or pleading through emotion. It was about stilling the mind, lifting thought above limitation, and planting new ideas in the fertile ground of consciousness. He taught that when you affirm something spiritually true like health, peace, abundance, you're not making it true. You're aligning with what is already true in divine mind. You're claiming your inheritance, so to speak, and by claiming it, you make it manifest in your experience. He used affirmations not as magic spells, but as tools to refocus the mind, to replace destructive thinking with constructive vision. In his most famous writings, Fox explained how important it is to remove fear from prayer entirely. If you pray for healing while secretly believing you're doomed, you're not praying, you're panicking. And panic doesn't reach God. Panic scrambles the signal. True prayer, he said, is calm, focused, and clear. It knows the truth even before it sees the result. It doesn't beg for change, it expects it. Not out of arrogance, but out of spiritual understanding. That's the difference. Fox didn't believe we pray to convince God to help us. He believed we pray to convince ourselves to align with what God has already made available. This was revolutionary. It shifted the very definition of prayer. No longer was it a ritual to earn favor. It became an act of creation, an inner sculpting of consciousness. Prayer, in Fox's teachings, was the moment you stopped reacting to the world and started shaping it with your thoughts. He said if you could hold one true spiritual idea in mind with unwavering faith, it would produce results. But the challenge, of course, was keeping your mind from slipping back into fear, doubt, or negativity. That's why he emphasized mental discipline. The mind, left unattended, tends to fall into old patterns, but a trained mind becomes a creative force. Fox saw every thought as a seed, and the soil was your consciousness. If you planted fear, worry, anger, or guilt, you'd grow experiences to match. But if you planted love, faith, joy, and gratitude, you'd grow miracles. The problem was that most people didn't know what they were planting. Their minds were overrun with weeds, thoughts they didn't even know they were thinking. Fox encouraged people to become gardeners of their own minds, to pull out what didn't serve them, to consciously choose what they allowed to grow, and to water their thoughts daily with attention and intention. This wasn't about toxic positivity. Fox never denied the existence of hardship or pain. He didn't teach that life would always be easy if you thought positively. What he taught was deeper, that your inner state has power over how you experience life and ultimately, over how life responds to you. You can be in the middle of chaos and still find peace if your thoughts are aligned. You can face loss and still hold on to faith. You can feel pain without surrendering to it. That's the real power he wanted people to see. Not the power to escape difficulty, but the power to rise above it. He often used the metaphor of a thermostat. A thermostat doesn't just report the temperature, it sets it. In the same way, your thought doesn't just reflect your environment, it sets the vibration. That attracts your next environment. If your thoughts are set to fear, then you're emotional. Climate will follow. If they're set to truth, then peace becomes your atmosphere. You can't always change what's happening around you, but you can always change the setting. And once you change the setting, the environment starts to adjust, slowly at first, but inevitably. Fox was adamant that prayer works, but only when it's done correctly. And correct prayer isn't about style, it's about substance. Are you praying from belief or from fear? From clarity or confusion? From alignment or desperation? He urged people to ask themselves these questions, because intention matters, frequency matters. The energy behind your words matters more than the words themselves. You can say "God help me" 1,000 times, but if it's filled with panic, it won't lift your vibration. But one calm thought like "I am safe, I am provided for, I am whole," held with sincerity, can change everything. He told people not to beg for a solution, but to become it. Don't ask for healing, think health. Don't ask for peace, think peace. Because the moment you embody it in consciousness, you begin to magnetize it into form. It's not a trick, it's not manipulation, it's alignment. Just like tuning a radio, when your mental frequency matches the spiritual reality, you begin to hear it, and eventually you begin to see it. Fox knew that faith wasn't just believing in something you couldn't see, it was the process of making it visible by thinking it into existence. He used many parables to teach this. One of his most famous was the golden key. It was simple, yet profoundly powerful. Whenever you're faced with a problem, he said, don't think about the problem, think about God. Shift your attention from fear to truth. Instead of analyzing the issue, obsessing over details, or falling into despair, just turn your thought toward the divine. Think about love, strength, order, wisdom, whatever aspect of the divine feels real to you. And as you do this, the problem begins to dissolve, not because you ignored it, but because you refused to energize it with your fear. You starved it of attention and fed your spirit instead. The golden key was Fox's way of giving people an emergency tool for mental alignment, and it worked. Thousands wrote to him with testimonies of impossible situations turning around, healing, reconciliation, financial breakthroughs, all because they stopped feeding the problem and started feeding the truth. Fox didn't claim to be the source of these miracles. He said he simply reminded people of what they had forgotten, that their mind is a sacred tool, and that their thoughts hold power beyond comprehension. He didn't expect blind belief. He invited experimentation. Try it, he said. Test it. Observe it. Use your life as the laboratory. That's what he did. He never claimed perfection. He had bad days, just like anyone. But he trained himself to return quickly to alignment, to catch the negative thought early, to pause before reacting, to breathe before speaking. That inner control gave him outer influence, not over others, but over his own experience. Fox often warned that this path isn't about control in the traditional sense. You don't get to dictate the exact outcome. You don't use prayer to manipulate events or people. You use it to align with truth and let truth unfold the best way it knows how. Sometimes the answer to prayer comes as peace. Sometimes it comes as a changed situation. Sometimes it comes as strength to endure. But it always comes when your thoughts are sincerely aligned. He reminded people that prayer is not a business transaction. It's a communion. It's the lifting of your mind from confusion to clarity, from fear to faith, from ego to spirit. When you do this, you're not convincing God to intervene. You're clearing the static that was blocking divine order from flowing into your life. You're not making the divine work, you're making yourself receptive to it. And that receptivity is the real secret. Over time, Fox's teachings reached thousands, then millions, not because they were flashy, but because they worked. Simple words, deep truths, radical implications. He taught people how to reclaim their minds, how to pray without begging, how to think with purpose, and how to expect good not as wishful thinking, but as a spiritual law. He didn't promise a perfect life. He promised transformation. And that, more than anything, is what people needed. Not escape, but empowerment. Not fantasy, but real, lasting change from the inside out. There's a moment when a person realizes the external struggle is an illusion, that what they're really fighting is their own reflection. Emmet Fox had this moment. He saw that battles, heartbreaks, losses, they weren't punishments. They were mirrors. Life is a mirror reflecting the dominant state of your inner world. This wasn't mysticism to him. It was as real as gravity. He understood that hate poisons the sender, not the target. That fear cripples only the one who feels it. And most of all, he saw love not the emotion, but the force as the ultimate tool of transformation. To Emmet Fox, love was not weakness. It was magnetic alignment with divine reality. When you love, you align. When you forgive, you let go of frequencies that keep you stuck. He didn't wait for peace to show up. He created it by embodying the frequency of it. His life was a living experiment in spiritual physics. Emmet Fox saw something most people miss entirely. He understood that we don't experience the world as it is, we experience it as we are. Every belief, every fear, every hidden insecurity colors the lens through which we interpret reality. Two people can live through the same situation and emerge with opposite conclusions. One sees hope, one sees despair, one sees a challenge, the other sees an ending. The only difference is what lives inside of them. Fox made it his life's mission to teach people that they weren't broken, they were misaligned. The pain they felt wasn't punishment, it was the echo of their internal disharmony, bouncing off the walls of their experience. Life, he taught, is not a series of random events. It is an exact feedback loop. Change your vibration and the world must change with it. This idea wasn't rooted in abstraction. Fox was deeply practical. He explained that anger doesn't just damage your peace, it attracts more situations that justify your anger. He said if you continually hold bitterness, you aren't hurting the person who wronged you, you're magnetizing more bitterness. The universe can only bring you experiences that match your dominant inner state. If you want freedom, you must become it on the inside first. If you want love, you must first be willing to radiate it, not as a transaction, but as a choice. Love was not some fluffy romantic idea to Fox, it was the highest form of alignment. It was divine electricity. When you truly operate from love, not attachment, not possession, not ego, you rise above lower frequencies. And the world responds not because you're manipulating it, but because you've risen above the static. Fox believed that people don't really have problems in the traditional sense. They have patterns, thought patterns, emotional habits, repeating loops of belief that play out like broken records. These patterns go unchallenged for years, sometimes decades. A person who feels abandoned in childhood may repeat that story unconsciously by sabotaging every relationship. A person who believes money is evil may subconsciously repel prosperity, even while praying for abundance. These patterns aren't fate, they're reflections. Fox showed people how to break them, not by fighting the world, but by facing themselves. The true battlefield, he said, is not outside your window, It's between your ears. Win there, and you win everywhere. The shift begins with awareness. Fox taught that you must become brutally honest about what you think, feel, and expect. He didn't sugarcoat things. He didn't believe in spiritual bypassing. If you're angry, admit it. If you're afraid, own it. But don't stop there. Trace the thought back to its root. Ask yourself, where did this belief come from? Is it true? Who would I be without it? This process of inner excavation was uncomfortable, but it was liberating. Most people carry beliefs they never chose, inherited, ideas, cultural programming, trauma responses disguised as truths. Fox gave people permission to release what no longer served them, not by fighting it, but by seeing through it. He compared the process to removing a mask. The mask may have protected you once, but now it's distorting your view. It's keeping you from intimacy with life. When you drop it, what's left is your real self, and that self is not broken. That self is not limited. That self is not afraid. It is aligned with infinite power, wisdom, and love. That self doesn't need to fix the world, it transforms it by its presence. But the mask has to go. The stories have to be questioned. The noise has to be silenced. Only then does truth emerge. Fox was ahead of his time. He saw the human psyche as a spiritual mechanism. He knew that forgiveness wasn't just morally right, it was energetically necessary. He saw guilt not as repentance, but as self-inflicted limitation. He understood that fear isn't something to analyze, it's something to rise above. These weren't philosophical positions. They were survival skills. If you want peace, stop rehearsing the past. If you want clarity, stop bathing in confusion. If you want joy, stop feeding resentment. Life gives you what you're tuned into. It cannot do otherwise. He often used analogies to make his point clearer. One of his favorites was the mirror. If you look in a mirror and don't like what you see, you don't try to change the reflection. You change yourself. The mirror is neutral. It only reflects. The same is true for life. If you're always seeing lack, betrayal, frustration, it's not life being cruel. It's life holding up a mirror to your vibration. Change the signal and the image must change. This doesn't mean ignoring injustice or denying reality. It means becoming a conscious participant in shaping it. You don't change the world by shouting at it. You change it by changing the frequency you bring into it. Fox believed that every person has the power to do this, but few take responsibility for it. It's easier to blame others, to project, to remain a victim. It feels good in the short term, but it costs you your power. Every time you assign blame, you give your creative energy to something outside yourself. Fox urged people to reclaim that energy, not to become selfish, but to become centered. You cannot give love if you're depleted. You cannot inspire peace if you're drowning in chaos. Your job, he said, is to keep your vibration high, your mind clear, and your heart open. Everything else follows. He emphasized that transformation isn't an overnight event. It's a daily practice, a moment-to-moment decision. You'll slip, you'll fall, but the key is to return again and again. Return to the truth, return to the love, return to the silence beneath the noise. That's where power lives. That's where clarity resides. Fox called it turning within, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. You don't find truth outside yourself. You remember it inside. And once you do, everything changes, not all at once, but certainly. He warned against seeking signs without first seeking alignment. People would often say, "I'll believe it when I see it." Fox reversed it. You'll see it when you believe it. Belief comes first. Experience comes second. This wasn't a mind trick, it was spiritual law. You must become the thing before the thing appears. If you wait for evidence to believe, you'll wait forever. But if you believe first, you create the evidence. The mirror must reflect what it's shown. If you hold the image of peace, love, and success in your mind with clarity and persistence, life will begin to reflect it back, not because you forced it, but because you became it. Fox wasn't selling dreams. He was teaching mastery, and mastery takes effort. It takes vigilance. It takes the willingness to sit with discomfort, to face your shadow, to surrender your ego's need to be right. But on the other side of that surrender is freedom, not freedom from challenge, but freedom from reactivity. The world doesn't stop being chaotic, but you stop being shaken by it. You stop being a puppet to circumstances. You become the calm in the storm. His approach to love was especially powerful. Fox didn't see love as emotion. He saw it as vibration, as consciousness, as the very essence of divine intelligence. To love is to align with truth. To hate is to separate from it. And separation causes suffering, not because love punishes you, but because it cannot reach you when you block it. Love is like sunlight, it's always shining. But if you close the blinds, you live in darkness. Fox invited people to open the blinds, not just for others, but for themselves. He taught that self-love isn't ego, it's essential. You cannot give what you haven't received. You cannot pour from an empty cup. When you fill yourself with divine love, you overflow, and that overflow transforms everything around you. Forgiveness was a major part of his teaching, but not for the reasons people expect. He didn't see it as letting someone else off the hook. He saw it as freeing yourself from their energy. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to suffer. It's self-sabotage disguised as justice. Fox told people that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. It's not approval, it's release. You don't forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because you do. Because you deserve peace. You deserve to move forward. You deserve to live unchained. This concept of energetic hygiene, of keeping your inner space clean, was central to Fox's work. Just like you wouldn't leave your home filled with trash, you shouldn't let your mind be filled with resentment, fear, or guilt. Clean it, clear it, replace the clutter with truth, with love, with vision. Because what you carry inside, you project outside, and what you project returns to you multiplied. He often reminded his listeners that the universe is not personal. It's vibrational. It doesn't respond to your wishes. It responds to your frequency. If your dominant emotion is fear, you attract situations that validate it. If your dominant emotion is gratitude, you attract experiences that match it. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional, about noticing when you drift and gently returning to alignment. Fox's teachings weren't about escaping reality. They were about transforming your relationship to it. He didn't offer shortcuts. He offered tools, and the most powerful tool was always the same: conscious thought, the deliberate choosing of what you focus on, what you believe, what you expect. Your mind is not a wild animal, it's a sacred servant. But you must train it. You must lead it. Because left unchecked, it will replay the past, recycle fear, and drag you through illusions. But trained, it becomes a lighthouse, a generator, a beacon of divine presence in a chaotic world. To live this way takes courage. It takes discipline. It takes humility. But most of all, it takes love. Love for the truth. Love for yourself. Love for the possibility that you are more than your circumstances, that you are not a victim of life, but a participant in its unfolding. And that, with each thought, each word, each breath, you are shaping the mirror that is your life. There's a strange power that comes when you stop trying to force life and start flowing with it. Fox knew this. He didn't stumble upon the idea while walking through nature or listening to music or meditating. In the mountains, it came from struggle, real struggle. It came from observing people who prayed desperately, who fasted, who wept, but whose lives never changed. It came from watching entire congregations spend years in churches and still live with inner torment, broken relationships, and lack. Emmet Fox knew that something was missing, not from God, but from the way people connected to him. The mistake was never in the desire. People had desire in abundance. What they lacked was alignment. They tried to control life instead of becoming one with it. They tried to force blessings instead of stepping into the vibration that would attract them. Fox saw life like a great river. Those who fought the current exhausted themselves, while those who aligned with its direction were carried farther than they ever imagined. He understood that life isn't about effort alone. It's about resonance. The idea wasn't new, but Fox gave it language for the common man. He didn't speak in riddles or esoteric jargon. He broke down spiritual truth into digestible, living wisdom. And his greatest revelation in this realm was the concept of inner circuitry. Just as electricity needs an unbroken circuit to flow, divine energy, or what he called the Christ consciousness, required a clear, undistorted channel within the human heart and mind. Negative emotions like bitterness, judgment, self-hate, fear, resentment. These didn't just make you feel bad, they literally broke the circuit. They cut off the energy of the divine flow. They made the individual a blocked vessel, incapable of receiving what was already being poured out from above. Most people pray for a breakthrough, not realizing they are the blockage. Most people demand signs, not realizing the signs are always being shown, but only to those tuned to the right frequency. Fox never said God wasn't responding. He insisted God always responds, instantly and generously. But if your radio is not tuned to the right frequency, the music will still be playing, but you won't hear it. Gratitude then wasn't just a nice thing to do, it was tuning the dial. It was aligning your mind with the frequency of answered prayer, not because your words were beautiful, but because your state was receptive. To say thank you for what you haven't yet seen requires faith. And faith, according to Fox, is spiritual certainty. It is not hope. It is not wishing. It is knowing. Most people wait for the result to be grateful. Fox reversed the order. Be grateful, and then the result will follow. Because gratitude shifts your vibration, and your vibration dictates your reality. This is not simply philosophical. Fox believed it was mechanical, as reliable as gravity. The law works, he said. It always works. Your job is to work the law, not to question it, not to beg for exceptions, but to understand how it functions and adjust yourself accordingly. He pointed out that those who continually live in a state of mental gratitude, even if they are struggling somehow, begin to see openings where others see walls. Opportunities begin to show up. People begin to change. The world begins to reorganize itself in subtle yet undeniable ways. But it's not magic, it's spiritual chemistry. Gratitude is a dissolving agent. It breaks down the hardened layers of fear and pride and lack that calcify around the heart. And once those dissolve, the divine light can flow again. Fox taught this in every sermon, every pamphlet, every moment he had with those seeking clarity. He wanted people to understand that the kingdom of heaven wasn't a place, it was a frequency. And you don't get there by dying, you get there by tuning. You get there by clearing the debris from your inner world so that the divine signal comes through loud and clear dot. And that debris, it's made of thoughts. It's made of every unexamined belief you inherited. Every voice that told you you weren't good enough. Every experience that conditioned you to expect failure. Every hidden fear that you never challenged. Emmet Fox wasn't concerned with surface positivity. He went deeper. He taught that even a small thought, left unchecked, could begin to rot your inner circuitry. He didn't preach fear, he preached responsibility. Responsibility for what you allow to live inside your mental home. Because thoughts don't stay thoughts, they grow. They attract their own kind. They form patterns, and patterns become reality. So Fox created mental practices, not to impress people, not to sound clever, but to give humanity a weapon, a tool to purify their inner system. He would ask people to take a single divine idea and hold it, not chant it blindly, but absorb it, live with it, let it shape the cells of their thoughts. For instance, if you're overwhelmed with worry, don't just try to stop worrying. Replace the worry with the idea, God is in charge. Not just repeat it, but meditate on it until its truth begins to eclipse the lie of fear, until the spiritual circuitry is rewired. He explained that what you impress upon your subconscious will always express itself in your life. This is not metaphor, it is law. If you impress lack, you will see lack. If you impress divine order, you will see order. If you impress love, you will find love in places you didn't expect. But the subconscious is not impressed by mere repetition. It responds to intensity, to emotion, to belief. That's why fear works so fast, it carries intensity. But so does gratitude, so does joy, so does reverence. So he urged people to feel as they think, not empty affirmation, but soul-felt agreement with the divine truth they were embracing. Fox had little patience for vague religion. He didn't believe you could separate practical life from spiritual law. To him, they were one. He believed the state of your finances, your health, your relationships all were mirrors of your spiritual alignment. He never meant that as blame. He meant it as liberation. Because if your reality reflects your inner world, then you're not a victim. You're a creator. You're not stuck. You're misaligned. And if misalignment is the issue, Alignment is the solution. The beauty of his teaching was its simplicity. Fox didn't offer complex rituals or unreachable ideals. He offered laws, universal, simple, and exact, and he believed every person, no matter their past, their background, their religion, had access to these laws. He wasn't trying to convert people. He was trying to awaken them, to shake them from their sleepwalking lives where they assumed God was far away, and remind them that God is a vibration you can live inside every day. A vibration of peace, clarity, order, and power. That's why Fox didn't ask people to beg God for favors. He asked them to become the kind of person who lives in divine rhythm. Because once you do, blessings don't come as surprises. They come as inevitable results. Just like planting a seed and watering it in fertile soil produces a harvest not by magic, but by law, so too does planting gratitude, faith, and truth within the soul bring about a harvest of peace, abundance, and clarity. Even in times of darkness, he reminded people that the laws still apply. The light is still on, but sometimes the clouds of doubt and fear obscure it. In those moments, he taught, the work is not to beg the sun to shine, but to rise above the clouds, to hold fast to the truth even when everything else screams the opposite. That's faith, not blind obedience, but conscious alignment. Emmet Fox's teachings weren't passive. They required fierce honesty and relentless consistency. They demanded you to watch your thoughts as you would guard your home, to cancel negativity the moment it enters, to rewire your assumptions about yourself, about life, and most of all, about God, not as a distant force, but as the essence flowing through your own consciousness. The secret wasn't locked in a vault or hidden in scripture. It was in your thoughts, your feelings, your patterns. Fox knew that if you could change those, you could change anything. Most people look for change outside of themselves. They chase opportunities, seek approval, adjust environments, or blame circumstances. But Emmet Fox knew something different. He understood that every external change is first preceded by an inner one. Nothing outside you can shift until something inside you moves first. And that movement isn't always loud, it's often subtle, like a realization that breaks the pattern of your old thinking. Fox believed that the root of all transformation was a change in consciousness. He saw clearly that you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. And what you are is the sum total of your dominant thoughts, your beliefs, and your emotional vibration. This wasn't a poetic idea for him, it was a scientific law as real as gravity. If you plant a seed in the soil, water it, and give it light, it will grow. In the same way, if you plant a belief deep in your subconscious and feed it with focus and emotion, your life will begin to mold itself around that belief. It will show up in your experiences, in your relationships, in your results, not because life is reacting to you, but because life is expressing you. Fox often warned people not to be fooled by appearances. He said the material world is just the echo, not the voice. The true voice is always the inner condition. If you change your inner dialogue, the outer world has no choice but to follow suit. The mistake most people make is they try to change the echo. They chase after symptoms instead of addressing the root. They focus on fixing their bank account, their relationship, their job, all the while ignoring the thoughts that created those situations to begin with. But trying to change outer conditions without changing inner beliefs is like repainting a cracked wall without fixing the foundation. Eventually, the cracks reappear. Fox taught that the subconscious mind doesn't respond to effort or desperation. It responds to impression, and that impression is made through repetition, emotion, and belief. That's why worry is so dangerous. It's a prayer for what you don't want. It imprints your subconscious with fear, and fear has a magnetic quality. It draws to it the very things it dreads. On the other hand, faith is a force of creation, not blind faith, but deep, intelligent trust in spiritual law, a belief that the universe is governed by order, not chaos, that good is the default, not the exception, that abundance is natural, not rare. Fox insisted that you didn't need to earn this goodness, you only needed to align with it. But alignment requires discipline, not the discipline of doing more, but the discipline of thinking better, the discipline of holding to the truth even when the facts scream otherwise. Emphasized that thoughts are not fleeting, they are living things. Every time you entertain a thought, you give it life, you give it shape, and eventually, you give it expression. This is why he told people to be ruthless with their mental diet. Just as you wouldn't eat spoiled food, you shouldn't consume destructive thoughts. Every thought you tolerate becomes a builder of your future. And the mind is always building, even when you're not aware of it. That's why Fox asked people to take responsibility for their inner world, to treat the mind like a sacred temple, to clean it daily, to guard it fiercely, to fill it with ideas of harmony, beauty, love, success, peace, and order. Because when your inner world becomes saturated with truth, your outer world has no choice but to mirror. I've also taught that emotional healing is essential for manifestation. If you carry wounds, resentments, fears, and shame, they don't just weigh down your spirit, they distort your frequency. And a distorted frequency cannot attract clarity. You cannot magnetize love while carrying hate. You cannot attract abundance while secretly resenting those who have it. You cannot experience peace while rehearsing pain. The subconscious mind is not fooled by your words, it knows your vibration. That's why Fox encouraged forgiveness, not just as a moral act, but as a spiritual strategy. Forgiveness clears the channel. It doesn't let others off the hook, it sets you free. It breaks the emotional chains that keep you bound to old experience. Many people try to manifest a new life while still clinging to old identities. They say they want change, but they keep affirming the same story. I'm not lucky. I've always struggled. People like me never make it. These are not harmless phrases, they're affirmations. And the universe always says yes. Fox would remind people that your word is your wand. Every time you speak, you cast a spell, not in some mystical way, but in a vibrational one. Your language programs your subconscious, and your subconscious programs your experience. That's why he urged people to speak only what they wanted to see, to bless their lives with words of power, to declare healing even when they feel sick, to speak abundance even when they feel broke. Because speaking is the first step of becoming. Hoffman said, don't describe the problem, declare the truth. Don't talk about how bad it is, talk about what it's becoming. Because your focus is fertilizer. Whatever you give energy to grows. If you focus on the lack expands. If you focus on divine order, order begins to emerge. And it doesn't matter how long you've been stuck. The moment you shift your focus, the seeds of change begin to sprout. Not because life suddenly changes, but because you did. Fox saw imagination not as fantasy, but as the blueprint of reality. He said whatever you can clearly imagine, feel, and believe, you will eventually experience. So he told people to visualize not just occasionally, but daily, to see themselves already in possession of the good they seek, to feel the emotions of that reality, to live mentally in the end result. Because the mind doesn't know the difference between what is real and what is vividly imagined. It responds to feeling, and when the subconscious is impressed with that feeling consistently, it begins to rearrange your life to match. I wasn't telling people to ignore facts. He was teaching them to create new ones. He knew that reality isn't fixed, it's fluid, and it bends to the dominant vibration of the observer. So if you want a new outcome, don't fight the old one, replace it. Starve it of attention, feed the new vision, and do it until the new becomes more real to you than the old. Until the unseen becomes more powerful than the seen. That's when change happens, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Fox didn't believe in luck. He believed in law. He believed that everything happens according to divine principle. That means if you're not getting the result you want, you're either violating a principle or not applying it fully. That's not blame, it's empowerment. Because it means the power is always in your hands. And no matter where you are, you can begin again. You can realign. You can re-impress the subconscious. You can choose a new mental blueprint. And when you do, the law response would often say that the universe is a mirror, not a judge. It doesn't punish or reward. It reflects. If you want to change what you see, change what you project. That projection comes from your dominant thoughts. Not the ones you think occasionally, but the ones you live in, the ones you feel emotionally, the ones you replay in your mind before bed, the ones that shape your expectations. That's why Fox insisted on being intentional. You can't afford lazy thinking. You can't afford to drift, because the moment you stop choosing your thoughts, the world starts choosing them for you. Fox didn't see prayer as begging. He saw it as alignment. He saw it as stepping into the frequency of what you're asking for. That's why he taught people to pray as if the thing is already done. Because spiritually, it is. The delay is not in the divine, it's in you. The divine answer is always yes, but your belief is the valve that controls the flow. If the valve is clogged with doubt, guilt, fear, or shame, the flow is blocked. Clear the valve, and the answer rushes in. That's the power of inner work. It's not glamorous, it's not always easy, but it's the real path to change. Fox didn't promise quick fixes. He promised true transformation. And that transformation begins when you accept full responsibility for your inner world. When you realize that every thought is a seed, every word is a declaration, every emotion is a magnet. You are never powerless. You are always broadcasting. The question is, are you broadcasting lack or abundance, fear or faith, confusion or clarity? Because the universe doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to who you are being, and who you are being is always up to you. Not what happened to you, not what others said about you, not your past, not your circumstances, but your present state of consciousness. That's the secret Fox knew. That's the truth he lived. And that's the truth he gave to the world, not as theory, but as practice. Because the mind is not just where change begins, it's where reality begins. He looked around the world and saw not just people, but frequencies. He didn't see struggle as an obstacle. He saw it as a vibration that needed realignment. Emmet Fox had tapped into a current of understanding that bypassed the intellect and penetrated the soul. When most of us walk through life reacting to everything that happens, he had discovered that there was a way to create life deliberately, to influence the seemingly immovable world by changing the inner world. Not by force, not by manipulation, but by a subtle shift in thought, by a quiet change in belief, and by aligning his consciousness with something infinitely higher than human limitation. This was not magic, it was law, and law, once understood, works for anyone whether they believe in it or not. The reason this secret worked so powerfully was because it was hidden in plain sight. It had been written into sacred texts, whispered in prayers, encoded in symbols across civilizations, but overlooked by the very people seeking salvation from their pain. Emmet Fox didn't invent this law, he recognized it. He dared to believe that the world was not governed by chaos, but by spiritual principles, precise and unbreakable. He dared to apply them when his own life was falling apart. And most importantly, he dared to teach it to others with such clarity that even a heart buried in despair could begin to feel the warmth of hope flickering again. There is a hidden language to life, a language without words. It's the language of energy, the language of emotion, of thought, and of belief. Most people don't know they're fluent in it. Every fear they feed, every doubt they nurture, every bitterness they hold, they are speaking in this silent language, and life is answering back. The universe does not respond to what we say, it responds to what we are. And Emmet Fox understood that if you wanted to change your life, you had to change your frequency. You had to tune out of fear and into faith. You had to shift your focus from lack to abundance. You had to, as he so often said, get out of the problem and into the solution. Not just intellectually, but spiritually, vibrationally, internally. And once that shift occurred, the outer world had no choice but to mirror it. He used to say that thoughts are things, and feelings are the fuel. A single thought charged with deep emotion becomes a blueprint for reality. You're not just hoping for better, you're creating better. But the truth is, most people don't guard their thoughts. They let the world dictate their inner climate. The news, the gossip, the disappointments, they absorb it all, and then wonder why their lives are heavy, anxious, and directionless. Emmet taught that the power was always within. That if you could hold a new vision long enough, deeply enough, lovingly enough, the old reality would crumble, and something new would take its place. He didn't teach this from a throne of comfort. He knew pain. He knew what it felt like to be broken, to be misunderstood, to have doors slammed shut and hearts grow cold. But even in those moments, he never gave his pain the final word. Instead, he turned inward. He reached for the divine. He meditated on truth. He prayed not as a ritual, but as a reset. And something began to shift, slowly at first. Then suddenly, life began to respond to his inner alignment. People showed up, opportunities opened, peace returned, and not because he changed the world, but because he changed himself. His secret was not about controlling the future. It was about becoming so aligned with the presence of God, with the divine order of the universe, that the future had no choice but to harmonize with that alignment. He reminded people again and again that you cannot manifest peace from a place of panic. You cannot create love while resenting yourself. You cannot find prosperity while feeding the frequency of lack. And so, he taught people to go within, to imagine differently, to believe radically, to love fiercely, and to forgive endlessly, not because it made you a good person, but because it made you a powerful one. One of the most profound things Emmet Fox revealed was the truth, that your circumstances do not define you, your consciousness does. You are not your past. You are not your failures. You are not your bank account or your diagnosis or your heartbreak. You are a spiritual being operating in a physical world. And the power that flows through you is the same power that created galaxies. When you start to think from that awareness, you rise above the noise. You stop begging life to be different and begin commanding it, not arrogantly, but confidently. You walk with a quiet knowing that everything you need is already within you. And from that place, miracles become normal. He spoke often of the power of forgiveness, not as a moral obligation, but as a spiritual necessity. Because as long as you are chained to resentment, you are chained to the frequency that created your pain. Forgiveness, in his teaching, wasn't letting others off the hook. It was setting yourself free. Free to rise, free to create, free to heal. He taught that holding on to bitterness was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And so, in every lecture, in every prayer, he urged people to release, to let go, to return to love, not just for others, but for themselves. Many of his students came to him desperate for change, clinging to the edges of their lives with weary hands and trembling hearts. And he welcomed them not with pity, but with power. He looked at them and didn't see victims. He saw creators who had forgotten who they were. He reminded them of their divine heritage. He showed them how to use spiritual tools. He gave them the blueprint to break free from the illusion of helplessness. And one by one, people began to shift, not always instantly, but definitely permanently. Because once you glimpse the truth, you can never fully return to ignorance. He emphasized the power of the imagination, not as fantasy, but as the first stage of creation. He would say, what you can imagine with clarity and feel with certainty, you can bring into form. He urged people to stop replaying past traumas and start rehearsing future blessings. The mind is a projector, he'd say, and whatever film you load into it will play out on the screen of your life. If you feed it fear, you'll live in fear. If you feed it faith, life will echo that faith back to you in ways you could never predict. There was a reason his teachings ignited such transformation. He never complicated truth. He made it simple, pure, and accessible. He stripped away the layers of dogma and brought people back to essence. God is love, and you are made in that image. Think love, speak love, feel love, and watch your life change. He didn't promise that problems would vanish overnight, but he promised that once you aligned with truth, you would never be at the mercy of problems again, because you would know who you are, and that knowing changes everything. He encouraged people to build a spiritual practice not out of duty, but out of desire, to wake up and anchor the day in gratitude, to pause in the storm and center in peace, to end each night not with worry, but with surrender. These simple acts weren't habits, they were power rituals. They recalibrated the soul, attuned the heart, and tuned the frequency higher. And when you vibrate higher, life responds differently. Doors open, hearts heal, paths clear, because the outer world is always dancing to the tune of your inner world. What Emmet Fox knew wasn't just a teaching, it was a transformation. It was a return to power, a return to presence, a return to truth. And the secret he held was never locked away. It was waiting, hidden in silence, ready to be discovered by anyone brave enough to look within and remember what they've always known deep down, but perhaps forgotten in the noise of the world, that you were never broken. You were never powerless. You were never alone. You just needed to match the frequency of the truth, and everything else would align. He knew that the world we touch, taste, see, and feel is only one layer of reality, and beneath it all is a hidden order and invisible current that carries everything. While most people try to change their outer world through effort, control, or manipulation, Emmet Fox realized that the outer is only ever a reflection of the inner. And this was not just a beautiful idea, it was an unshakable law. What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you believe, you create. When your internal world is filled with fear, resentment, or doubt, no matter how hard you work or how much you struggle, your results will always reflect that vibration. But when your inner world is aligned with peace, love, and divine certainty, life begins to reshape itself around you, not by force, but by law. He understood that the most profound shifts in life do not come from action alone. They come from consciousness. They come from a changed mind, a renewed heart, a surrendered soul. And once that shift happens, everything else begins to follow. Would often say that everything in your life is a manifestation of your consciousness, and nothing can truly change until you do. People live their lives begging for change, begging for health, for love, for money, for purpose, yet remain bound to old frequencies of fear, lack, and limitation. They pray with their lips but doubt in their hearts. They visualize blessings while secretly clinging to guilt, shame, or unworthiness. And so, life does not respond to what they wish for. It responds to what they are vibrating at the deepest level. Emmet taught that the first step is not to fix the world, but to fix your frequency. You must rise internally before life can rise externally. You must clean the lens through which you view the world. Because if your perception is tainted by fear, even the most beautiful life will appear dark and heavy. One of his most radical ideas was that heaven and hell are not places, they are states of consciousness. You can live in heaven while walking through challenges if your heart is filled with love and faith. And you can live in hell while surrounded by riches if your heart is filled with bitterness and fear. It is not the condition that determines your peace, it is the condition of your soul. When you live from that truth, everything changes. You stop blaming the world. You stop waiting for the future. You stop carrying the past. You return to the present moment, the only place where real power exists. And you choose your frequency with intention. That is where the miracle begins. That is where the shift starts. Not out there, but in her. Emmet Fox's teachings didn't ask you to deny reality. They invited you to rise above it. He didn't pretend that pain wasn't real or that loss didn't hurt. He simply reminded us that we are more than our pain, that beneath the surface of every heartbreak is an opportunity to return to truth, that behind every setback is a hidden lesson asking us to grow, that even the darkest night carries the seeds of dawn. He didn't ask people to escape life, he asked them to transform their relationship to it, to become conscious creators, not passive victims, to step out of the fog of fear and into the clarity of divine order. And that transformation was never reserved for saints or sages. It was available to anyone, anytime, anywhere. The only requirement was willingness. Nash believed in the power of decision, not just casual wishing or half-hearted hoping, but radical, spiritual decision. A decision to rise, a decision to let go, a decision to believe, even when it hurts. He knew that when the soul makes a clear decision, the universe moves, opportunities appear, resources align, people are drawn, not because something magical has happened, but because the vibration has shifted. And in this universe, frequency is the real magnet. You do not attract what you want, you attract what you are. So the question is never what do I want? It's who am I becoming? That shift in focus rewrites your destiny. It makes you powerful. It brings you back to center. Also taught that every single day is a fresh canvas, that no matter how broken your past, no matter how long you've struggled, the present moment is a doorway back to power. The mistake most people make is thinking their past defines them. But the truth is, your past is only a pattern, and patterns can be broken, beliefs can be rewritten, stories can be retold. You are not chained to who you used to be. You are always free to choose again. And that choice is not a what-I'm event, it's a practice. Every morning, you choose again. Every setback, you choose again. Every failure, every tear, every doubt, you keep choosing alignment. You keep choosing faith. You keep choosing love. That's the real work. And that's the only work that changes. Livesh used to say that spiritual growth is not about becoming something new, it's about remembering who you've always been. Before the wounds, before the trauma, before the fear, at your core you are divine. You are powerful. You are free. The world may have told you otherwise. Life may have tried to convince you you're small. But the truth was never gone, it was just buried. And Emmet Fox helped people dig through the rubble and find it again. With every word, with every teaching, he chipped away at the lies people had believed for years. And once the truth was uncovered, everything changed. Not because the world got easier, but because they became stronger. Emphasized the importance of spiritual practice not as a rule, but as a rhythm. Meditation, prayer, affirmation. These weren't rituals to impress God. They were tools to remind the soul, tools to raise the vibration, tools to bring the mind back from the chaos of the world and into the stillness of the divine. And it was in that stillness that power was reborn. Because silence isn't empty, it's full of guidance, full of wisdom, full of healing. And when you learn to dwell in that silence, you discover that the answers you were searching for outside were always waiting inside. He spoke about divine order not as a wishful thought, but as a reality more solid than stone. That even when life seems chaotic, even when plans fall apart, there's an intelligence running beneath it all, that nothing is random, that even your delays are divinely timed, that even your pain is purposeful. The human mind may not always see it, but the soul knows. And when you trust in that divine order, peace becomes possible. You stop fighting life. You start flowing with it. You stop demanding answers and start listening for guidance. And slowly, life begins to reflect your trust. The more you align, the more aligned everything becomes. Warned against the frequency of fear, not because fear is evil, but because fear is a liar. It whispers of lack when abundance is already present. It tells you you're alone when love is all around. It makes you shrink when you were born to rise. Fear doesn't protect you, it paralyzes you. And Emmet Fox taught that the fastest way to shift out of fear is not to fight it, but to flood it with faith, to speak truth louder than the lie, to affirm, to pray, to visualize, to act not from fear, but from knowing. Because when you know who you are, fear loses its grip. Also spoke of love, not just romantic love, but divine love, unconditional, eternal, transformative. He taught that love is not something you earn, it's something you remember. It is your natural state. And when you return to love, everything realigns. Relationships heal, bodies heal, minds heal. Because love is the highest frequency. It dissolves resistance. It clears confusion. It reconnects you to the source. And when you operate from that place, you don't have to chase miracles. They find Yahweh's teachings brought people home to themselves. They were not designed to impress, they were designed to awaken. Simple, profound, practical. He wasn't trying to give people more information, he was trying to give them transformation. And transformation doesn't come through knowledge alone, it comes through experience, through applying the truth, through walking it, through living it, through returning to it again and again, until it's no longer just something you believe, but something you believed. That suffering was not the end of the story, it was the invitation. That when life breaks you, it's asking you to rise differently. That when you lose everything, you're being called back to what really matters. That even in the pit of despair, there's a rope of light pulling you upward. But you have to grab it. You have to choose it. You have to say yes to the healing, even when the pain feels familiar. You have to be willing to leave behind the version of you that survived and become the version that thrives. Ash reminded people that they were not powerless, that their thoughts were not small, that their words were not empty. Every thought is a seed. Every word is a spell. Every feeling is a frequency. And the universe is always listening, always responding, always rearranging itself to reflect the vibration you're holding. When you truly understand that, you stop playing small. You stop speaking defeat. You stop entertaining doubt. You start living deliberately. You start speaking life. You start thinking in alignment with the divine. And that shift makes you magnetic, not to just anything, but to everything meant for you. He knew the journey wasn't always easy. He knew the mind would resist, the past would echo, the world would distract, but he also knew that consistency would win. that the soul, once awakened, cannot go back to sleep, that the light, once seen, cannot be unseen. And so, he urged people to keep walking, to keep rising, to keep remembering, not perfectly, but persistently, because the real power isn't in never falling. It's in always getting back up with more faith than before. He didn't just teach this truth, he lived it in silence, in storms, in simplicity. His life became the living proof of what happens when a person aligns with divine frequency. And though he's gone from the physical world, his message continues to ripple outward, not because it was loud, but because it was real. And real power never dies. It simply moves through new hearts, new minds, new voices, whispering the same eternal secret. You are not here to survive. You are here to create. You are here to heal. You are here to remember. You are here to rise. The moment you finally realize that everything you were chasing outside already lives inside you, something magnificent shifts. The chaos quiets. The noise dissolves. The rush fades. And for the first time, you begin to feel like you've arrived not to a place, but to yourself. This was the deepest secret Emmet Fox understood and quietly lived by. He didn't seek to change the outer world first. He changed within. And by doing so, the world around him transformed like a reflection in a mirror. This wasn't philosophy. To him, it was practice. He knew the mind was not just a storage house of thoughts and memories, it was a workshop of creation, a temple of divine influence, a field in which every belief was a seed. And he became a careful farmer of his mind, guarding his mental garden from the weeds of fear, envy, resentment, and doubt, while nurturing the fruits of love, truth, joy, and unwavering faith. Every word you speak carries a frequency. Every belief you hold anchors your reality. Emmet Fox knew this not in theory, but by witnessing the real consequences of mental causation. In everyday life, he observed how worry brought more worry, how hate birthed more hate, and how people unknowingly recycled their suffering by replaying the same stories in their minds over and over again. To him, the solution was not more striving, but more awareness, not more effort, but more alignment. He believed that if you could just change your thought about a thing, the thing itself would change. That if you held a new mental image long enough, the old one would dissolve. Just like light dissolves darkness, not by fighting it, but by simply being itself. He taught that God is not distant. God is not a punisher nor a tester of faith. God is mind. God is love. God is law. And most importantly, God is within. Not in a temple far away, not only in holy texts or rituals, but right there within the silence of your own soul. The door to God is not outside you. It is in your consciousness. This understanding redefined everything. It removed the fear of an angry deity. It removed the desperation of begging and pleading. It replaced it with responsibility and empowerment. If God is within me, then I am not waiting on Him, I am aligning with Him. And alignment means living in harmony with divine laws, forgiveness, gratitude, honesty, compassion, and faith. These are not moral suggestions. They are spiritual technologies. Fox understood the human mind like few others did. He knew that the subconscious accepts whatever you repeatedly feed it, whether truth or lie, joy or terror, hope or regret. It doesn't discriminate. It obeys. And this is where most people lose the battle of life. They try to change their circumstances without changing the programming. They try to chase peace while thinking anxious thoughts. They beg for love while secretly believing they're unworthy. They want abundance while rehearsing stories of lack. Fox knew this contradiction is what keeps people stuck. So he taught people how to truly think, not reactively, not emotionally, but spiritually. He believed in the power of spiritual treatment, where you deliberately impress your mind with truth, with wholeness, with love, not to manipulate outcomes, but to become aligned with the highest reality. The mind, according to Fox, was like a radio receiver. You could tune into any frequency: fear, anger, jealousy, or you could rise and tune into divine wisdom, courage, clarity. It was all there. The signal was always being broadcast, but you had to rise to meet it. This is why he emphasized that changing your life begins not with force, but with frequency, not with hustle, but with harmony. When you match the vibration of what you seek, you begin to live as though it's already yours, and in doing so, You attract it not through magic, but through divine law. This is not wishful thinking. This is ancient truth dressed in modern understanding. This is what he knew. This is what he lived. Fox often said, "You are not your past. You are not your fears. You are not your failures. You are not even your personality. You are spirit. You are infinite. You are divine." These were not just affirmations. They were awakenings, words meant to shake you out of sleep. Because most people live in a dream, not the dream of their highest potential, but the nightmare of old beliefs, of inherited fear, of second-hand limitations. They repeat cycles not because they're weak, but because they're unaware. They forget that they have the power to choose again, to think again, to believe differently. And so Fox's message was one of remembrance. Remember who you are. Remember what lives within you. Remember that no matter how far you've wandered, you are never separate from the source. The secret Emmet Fox knew was never really hidden. It was just buried under the noise of the world. It was whispered in silence, lived in moments of stillness, expressed through forgiveness, and activated through gratitude. When you forgive someone, even when they don't ask, you align with God. When you choose peace over proving a point, you align with God. When you give thanks in the middle of the storm, you align with God. And that alignment is what heals, not the act itself, but the shift in consciousness it produces. Because when you rise in awareness, you rise in life. Many people ask why their prayers go unanswered. Fox would say, perhaps your prayer was more fear than faith. Perhaps you were begging for something while holding an inner image of its absence. Perhaps you asked for change, but still saw yourself as broken. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your dominant state. So if you want real results, you must become the prayer. Live in the vibration of the answered prayer. Think from it, speak from it, act from it. Not to impress God, but to sync with Him. Because He already said yes. It's you who must tune in to receive. Fox knew this was hard for the human ego to accept. The ego loves drama. It loves struggle. It loves proving, fixing, chasing. But the soul loves truth. It knows that you don't need to fight for what's already yours by divine inheritance. You just need to stop resisting it. Let go of resentment. Let go of guilt. Let go of stories that don't honor the divine within you. And then, with a pure heart, declare boldly that you are ready to receive. You are ready to believe. You are ready to become the vessel for the highest good. The world will still be noisy. There will still be storms. But when the inner world is governed by truth, the outer world becomes a classroom, not a prison. You stop reacting to life and start responding from the soul. You stop feeling like a victim of fate and start living as a co-creator of reality. That's what Fox wanted people to see, that your mind is not a cage, but a key, and with it, you can unlock dimensions of peace, abundance, love, and wisdom that no one can take from you. This isn't religious dogma. This is spiritual liberation. In the end, the greatest secret Emmet Fox knew wasn't how to get more, it was how to remember you already are. More than your fears, more than your past, more than your mistakes. You are the living expression of God's own idea, placed here not to survive, but to shine, not to conform, but to awaken. And once you truly know that, nothing can stop you, not because the world changes, but because you've changed. You no longer chase light, you become it. You no longer search for peace, you embody it. And you no longer fear the future, you create it with love. So let this be your awakening. Let this be your turning point. The secret Emmet Fox knew now belongs to you. Guard it, live it, share it, and most of all, believe it. Because your life is not happening to you, it is responding to you. Your thoughts are not small, they are sacred. And your faith is not just a belief, it is the bridge between the invisible and the visible. Walk that bridge, not once, every day, until truth becomes your language, until love becomes your frequency, until you no longer just admire the light but finally remember you are the light.